I need help, and I ask for help. And I call Dave. I say, Dave, I need help. I need money. I need time. I need this. I need that. And he always says, and this is always hazardous, yes. What do you need? Well, one time I called Dave, and I said, I need help. And he said, well, how much do you need? And I said, I don't need money. He said, well, what do you need, Dan? I said, well, it's bigger than that. Well, what is it? What is it? Just tell me. I said, well, I need your house. I have to have your house. And he says, well, golly, I've never really had anyone ask for my house before, but... And so I said, well, my concept is I just want to take kids to the lake for the day. I just want to go and hang out at the lake. And so since you're at the lake, we just need your house. And so he said, all right. And so we came and we invaded his house. And not only did we just ransack the entire house, but they fed us, and they were just wonderful hosts. And we have such great memories of that time. So we appreciate his relationship with the church, his support for the church. And, of course, Dave's got a lot of old stories, good stories about days here at First Christian. But got to tell you one other story. David called me. He said, Dan, I want to take you to lunch. And I said, oh, I don't know about that. I mean, there really isn't such a thing as a free lunch, so I don't know. I mean, it sort of could be a problem. You might start asking me for something, and I don't know about that. So went out to lunch, and he had a spectacular story to tell me. And I said, David, please just tell the congregation that story. Tell them, because they will be so blessed. And so he's here, all because he took me to lunch. And that was, he will not take me to lunch again, I'm sure. Jessica's his daughter's going to read some scripture for us, and we're really thrilled to have her here today with us also. And so I know you'll be blessed, so we look forward to hearing the good news from Dave.
God will never give you more than you can handle. That's a phrase I've come to really dislike. All my life I've heard this phrase whenever somebody goes through a really rough patch. And that's a sweet thought, and the people who say it are really caring and they have really concerned hearts. But it isn't true. I don't think it ever mentions in the scripture that the Lord won't give you more than you can handle. So why did the Lord trust me and my family so much? Why did he think we could handle this kind of trial? I know that sounds harsh, but I promise I haven't lost my mind and I'm not some angry with God woman who hates the world. Actually, when I realized this simple fact that God can and will give us all more than we can possibly bear, it got a lot easier, and it started to make sense. I know for a fact that we all go through trials that overwhelm us. That's just the reality of life. But this last trial is the one that shook my family to the core and had me searching for answers as to why it was happening to a man like my father and how I could possibly survive it. My dad was diagnosed with incurable, inoperable, metastatic, which is kind of a fancy word for spread all over, cancer, almost 2 years ago. After his diagnosis, I went to his house and we had a heart-to-heart right on his back deck where he sits a lot. What he told me then was amazing. He told me that he'd always been a follower of Jesus. He said he wasn't afraid to die. He just didn't want the word cancer to define him, although he knew it would always be the white elephant in the room from that day forward. He informed me that he knew the stages of dying, but I would never see him angry because he tried to live his whole life to be a role model for our family and friends, and that's the way he would leave this world. I was so upset that my daughter would lose her grandfather and my brother's son might not know him. And to this he said, "What do you really remember when you were 5, 6, 7, 8 years old? Not much." Again, he was the rock consoling me when he just received the worst possible news a person could imagine. That's my dad. That's who he is. He's the real deal. In the back of my mind, I reminded myself, millions of people go through this and have already gone through this very thing. But it really is unbearable. And if you disagree, it's because you haven't been there yet. So when we first got the news, I worried constantly. I'm a worrier. I worried about my mom and how she would be able to deal with this, while also taking care of her mother, who's now at Richfield with hospice services. Is it fair to be on the verge of losing your mother and at the same time your husband receives this diagnosis? I worried that I wasn't doing enough to help. I worried about balancing my time with my family, who are most important to me. I worried about my brother, who's out in Seattle, and how he would handle all of this from across country. I worried about everything. It consumed me, so I took up reading some scriptures because I needed help. I found a verse that would help guide me through it. It was Matthew 6:27, and it simply states, "Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life?" Now that may sound weird, but I interpret it to mean that we all have our day and time. Who knows when that's going to be? But if we spend the time we do have worrying, we'll miss out on all the good things, the important things, the day-to-day things that really matter the most. I read that verse a lot because I am a worrier, and it's helped me to keep it all in perspective, and I hope it can help you all too. So even though life sometimes does give us more than we can handle, I can honestly say that what I've learned so far in this journey is to take each day as it comes. Be thankful for the time you do have with the people you love. Sing and dance, put things in perspective, and live your life with no regrets. I can honestly tell you that's how my family lives, and we did live way before cancer ever came into our world. And stop worrying so much. Life's going to happen, so sit back and enjoy the ride. So with that, I'd like you to meet one of the bravest guys I know, my dad, Dave Moran.
Thank you, Jessica. And thank you, Dan. First, let me say I feel at home here. This has always been God's house for me when I was a little child. My family goes back in this church for generations. When I was a little kid, I was here every time the door opened. And it was because I wanted to be, and it was because it was the thing to do. And a lot of times I'd have my Bible with me, and sometimes I'd have 4 or 5 or 6 Bibles under my arm. Okay, that's a lie. I was here because we lived out in the boonies, and it was a great opportunity for me to see folks and be together with other people. Plus, the ladies of First Christian Church were known for having the best food going. So I was here every time the door opened. I've got a lot of memories of this place. My mom and dad, as I said, they were both born within several blocks of here, and they're both buried up here on Church Hill. I was baptized in this church 59 years ago. I remember back when this building was built. Some of you folks will remember there was a huge white steeple on this church. And it really grieved my dad that they were going to basically junk this steeple. So he got together with some guys from the church, and they got a flatbed truck, and they loaded this huge steeple on this truck and took it up to where we lived, out of the middle of nowhere. Well, my dad, after we got up there, he finally decided, well, what are you going to do with this thing? So he finally decided he would put it on top of our horse barn. So, okay, so we finally got it up there, but during the course of the thing, about the top 3 or 4 feet of the steeple was broken off. So you can imagine how this looked. So my dad, being the creative, wonderful guy that he was, decided that that wasn't going to work. He couldn't fix the steeple. So somewhere at a flea market or somewhere, he found this huge silver ball and put that up on top of the steeple. So you can imagine how this looked at, this huge steeple, white, with this huge silver ball on top of it. So for years, people would come up to our house, and for years we told them, well, we were involved in the space program, and and then later on I told them, well, I think we're going to do kind of a wilderness disco out here. But at any rate, it was great, and finally it remained there for years and years and years, and some of you folks, older folks here, will remember that. I also was very active in the youth group here at the time, and that was another opportunity for me to get off the mountain and get down and socialize with people, especially my own age, and I had some wonderful times in the youth group. I do remember that one of the things that they threw on us one time was that we had to memorize a Bible verse. You all can imagine what I chose. It's John 11:35. Jesus wept. Shortest verse in the Bible. That's one I can remember. My kids grew up in this church. As a matter of fact, Jessica made her decision. I think that she was going to be involved with helping children and helping challenged people back when she worked as a counselor at Craig Springs. And she was, 14? Ninth grade. And she always gets mad when I tell this, and I always promise her faithfully I won't say it, but I will. This is Dr. Jessica. She has a PhD, and she works with kids. That decision was made at Craig Springs. Got a lot of ties in this church, as I say, but I'm here today to tell you to stop worrying. Now, let me ask you something. On a year ago today, I'm sure some of you had something that was a speed bump in your life. It was something that just skunked your groove. It was something that rattled your cage. But I'll bet you, if you're like me, can't remember what it was. That was a year ago. So I'm here today to tell you to stop worrying about all these little things, stop worrying about all these big things, because in a lot of cases, they're so small and they're so important at the time, but when you get to them and you think back on them, they're nothing. Now, I've been fortunate because I've always felt that God was looking over my shoulder. I've been so lucky, so blessed all of my life. With my family, with everything I've done, business-wise and so forth, I have been so blessed. I was Mr. Positive. I was Dave-O on the radio. I was the boss with the hot sauce. I was Captain Dave. Things were going real good. But then I got sucker punched. I got blindsided. Got body slammed. I was on a routine visit to check on my arthritis with doctors. One thing led to another. And they delivered me the news. You've got cancer. Can't operate. Can't cure it. It's pretty aggressive, spreading to your bones. You're going to have treatments every 4 months just to see how you're making it, and in the meantime, medication and this kind of thing. So this came out of nowhere. Sharon and I were blindsided. And as I say, treatment every 4 months, and then, wow, maybe it'll work. It's spreading. Well, actually, one of the first things that went through my mind at that point, not the first thing. The first thing, it scared me to death, and it was awful, as you can imagine. But the second thing went through my mind. You seen these commercials with Christy Lane, and I'll never forget the day that you heard this hit song when Christy sang "One Day at a Time." I started singing 4 months at a time. That's the kind of thing that happens and goes through your mind when you get this kind of news. Well, over the next few days, Sharon and I decided that we would use the approach that Jessica just told you about. I knew I could handle it. I knew I could, in spite of all the bluster that I was facing, major worry. This was going to be tough. So first thing we had to turn to was my old reliable, Psalm 46:1.
God is my refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble.
Hey, that's good. Let's have some more. Let's have some Deuteronomy.
He will give you strength equal to your day.
That's good, especially when you think about that. I think of the kids with snowballs. If you don't have this past week, if you couldn't win with the snowball you had, God will give you a bigger one. Well, okay, I had the verse that Jessica sent me, and the spiritual help from her and from Dan and folks. And so now I need some guidelines. I need some channel markers to help me navigate through what I'm going to be going through for the next, hopefully a long time, but at least the next 4 months. And I came up with this, and Sharon and I talked a lot about this. The first thing is, mind your own business. Now, that sounds kind of harsh, and I don't mean it that way. I mean that you need to mind your own business. When you get bad news, when you're worried, your own best advocate is you. You'll find all sorts of things on the internet, and you'll find everybody tells you this and that and the other and all this kind of thing, and it's so appreciated and so helpful, but still your own best advocate is you. I researched prostate metastatic cancer. I've checked in all of these things. I really researched it. And I want to say this, I'll get this in right here. Now, guys, get your PSA level checked once a year. Now, you'll find when you read up that it's not a very great test. A lot of doctors don't want it. A lot of doctors won't do it. Well, not won't do it, but they don't like to do it. But it's the only test we've got. And prostate cancer, believe it or not, is known as the champagne cancer in the medical community, because a lot of guys live a lot of years with prostate cancer, but only if it's detected early. So you guys, get your prostate checked at least once a year. Your best advocate for you is you. Another thing I'd like to ask you to do is what I do, and that is really important, and that is prioritize your time. Some time ago, I was talking to my son who has his own business out in Seattle. And I'm going, "How you doing, Peter?" And he said, "Dad, the time burglars are driving me crazy. And you've got to beware of the time burglars." And one of the biggest time burglars that I have found out after this is me. I need to prioritize my time. When people ask me to do something or want me to do something or I want to do something, I need to put it up on the scales, kind of weigh it out and see. I need to prioritize. Another thing that I came up with my guidelines is ask yourself this question. When you're about to make a decision, when you're worried to death, ask yourself this question. A lot of those that know me well know that I've said this for ages. It's called, will any good come of this? Everything you go to do, big, little, whatever, will any good come of this? And most of the time you'll find, I've found all of the time, it is a great guideline. If there's some good to come of it, I go ahead and do it. Now, this is a concept that I got from attending a sales seminar years ago, and the guy who was speaking was a guy named W.E. Jones. And I remember it because his thing was, there's something good to be said about any situation. And that was the basis of his whole talk. There's something good to be said about anything. This guy in the back raised his hand and he said, "My brother's in the penitentiary. He's sentenced to death. They're going to put him to death tomorrow in the electric chair. What good can I tell him? What can you say about that?" Mr. Jones said, "More power to you." Anyway, I went on from there, and my thing is, ask yourself, will any good come of this? Another guideline I use is sometimes think like a child. Make your own kind of music. Be aware of the amazing things in your life. I sat on my back deck, which everybody likes to talk about my back deck, and I'll be talking about that in a minute. I sat on my back deck the other day, and I watched a bug for 10 minutes. Pretty cool. Never did that before. I took up playing the pan drums along with my friend Clay. Jimmy Buffett type stuff. One of the great things that in my life was to play the first line of Yellow Bird High in a Banana Tree. But it was great. My cat, Arrogant Carl, who has been with us for a long time, I never paid a lot of attention to him until the last couple of years, and he's gotten so that he kind of appreciates me and will tolerate me, and I've learned a lot about him, but don't worry, he's still Arrogant Carl, and will walk across my face and do whatever he wants to do anytime. And the last thing, Number 5 on your list is assemble your A team, your family, your friends. Only one requirement to be on your A team. And these are people that have got your back. Put your A team together. These are the people that you can call anytime. They call you anytime. These are people, your A team has you back. You know, these are good lines, good guidelines if you're in perfect health. And if you've got a problem, that's something that's worrying you to death, I hope you will think about them. So, okay, after we get the news and we work out these guidelines and we get our spiritual support in there, well, we're following these rules. I'm walking the walk and I'm doing what my doctors say and the insurance people and getting my injections and taking the meds. But the elephant's still in the room. Still worried. But I'm doing okay. But I'm still worried. September 23rd of last year, I'm out on my deck, looking at the sunset. Been doing that a lot. I've done that all my life, but I've particularly been doing it the last year and a half. I'm out on my deck, and I look off in the distance, watching the sunset, and I got a glass of wine, I will tell you, but behind the clouds over there, all of a sudden, the sun starts pulsing. And behind these clouds, I see my dad, my mom, my brother, and one other person I still haven't really made out who it is. And during all of this voice comes to me. I'm out here on my deck. This voice comes to me, and all this starts, and this voice is saying, stop worrying. Stop worrying. Well, first of all, I was scared to death. I mean, this is the kind of thing that doesn't happen to Dave Moran. I mean, you know, this is kind of strange here. First thing I did, I looked up something in the wine, but I had very little of that. I thought maybe somebody slipped me a Mickey or something, but that wasn't the deal. So I think, you know, this is unreal. This can't be happening. And this kind of thing, I have to be honest with you. I'm the kind, most of the time when I hear a story like this, I go, well, you know, some entertainer's career has gone on the skids and they found Jesus. I was a cynic, but not this day. Not this day. And I was shaky. I was nervous. It just kept pulsing, and the voice kept going. Stop worrying. And you know, I'm thinking, this is real. You know, this is real. So this goes on for 10 or 15 minutes. And so I went inside and I told Sharon about it. And we sat down and we talked about it a long time. And I called some of my friends and people and whatever, and I told them about it. And they all agreed the same conclusion I'd come to. Dave, you were touched. You know, that was the presence of God. So a little bit farther after that, a few days after that, I'm back out on this deck. So I see these 3 lights. And this is a beautiful day, not a cloud in the sky. And these 3 lights just kind of slowly come over. Father, Son, Holy Ghost? I don't know. But that's what I believe. Because after that, I see everything. Seems like in 3s. It'll be 3 of this and 3 of that. And I'm telling you, I see God's presence everywhere I turn since then. So I cannot tell you what an experience this was for me. But Dan made me tell you. So I wanted to tell folks because it was so amazing. So after this happened, So you can imagine how, stop worrying. What a great message. Wow. Stop worrying. Jessica, song.
He will have no fear of bad news. His heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord.
When I was a little kid, my dad used to talk about the sacred mystery. We would have talks about spiritual matters when I was a kid and even when I was an adult. And sometimes we would have, and my dad was a very spiritual and Christian man. He made me hear every time the doors open. He used to talk about the sacred mystery when I would ask him these questions. And I really didn't know what he was talking about, but now I know what he's talking about. I'd like to close with something that was on the wall of my house among my earliest memories when I was a little kid. And that was a prayer that I'm sure most of you will recognize. But when I was looking this up, I always saw the first verse. It's got two verses. And I'd like to share those with you today. Both verses. First part you probably heard. God, give me grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed. Courage to change the things which should be changed. And the wisdom to distinguish one from the other. Here's the second verse. Living one day at a time. Enjoying one moment at a time. Accepting hardship as a pathway to peace. Taking, as Jesus did, the simple world as it is, not as I would have it. Trusting that you'll make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. I'd like to thank everybody for coming today, especially my lake buddies, who it was a pretty good trip for them to come up here. I'd like to thank Dan for encouraging me to share my story with you. And I'll just close as we old radio guys say, wishing you blue skies and green lights. Drive carefully. If you are driving, make sure you have a car. If I get a letter from you, be sure and write. Stop worrying. And remember, we're all too blessed to be stressed. Thank you.
Wow, spectacular. A lot of things have changed since Dave was a little boy. A lot of things have changed about this sanctuary. A lot of things may change in the future. But there's one thing, never change. What is it? Could be God and his presence. It's going to be this table, right? Not maybe this actual table. But we know that when this church meets, be it in a fellowship hall or here or anywhere else, there will always be a table. And we know we'll always gather around it. That is the number one characteristic of us, because we believe that the table is a place where we feel God's presence. David had his experience on a deck, standing, watching the sun. Many of us have that same experience around a table. Maybe it's Thanksgiving, maybe it's Christmas, around a table. So you're welcome to this table. Please feel welcome to be a part of this celebration, this feast together, as we sing one stanza of our hymn of communion, Bread of the World in Mercy Broken.